I built a road on my own land, not for some big payday, but just to keep our third-generation farm breathing. 2 long months of backbreaking work, clearing out thick brush, hauling in crushed limestone, paying for every single yard myself. The morning it was finally finished, the sun catching the silver gravel just right. The Redwood Creek Homeowners Association. They didn't waste time with a letter. They put a goddamn steel gate right across it and slid a clean, crisp invoice under my wiper for $300 a month just to use the path I had literally just forged. They figured I'd blow up, right? They thought I'd be the stereotypical angry farmer, hook up the chain to the dozer, and tear that thing out of the concrete in a satisfying 30 seconds. They were betting on my temper. They were wrong. I didn't give them the show they wanted. I didn't destroy their cheap steel gate. Instead, I quietly and legally dismantled everyone who stood behind it. I remember standing there in the first light, my coffee still warm, just staring at that gate like it had materialized out of thin air. Square steel posts, sunk deep into fresh concrete that hadn't even cured yet. A shining keypad bolted at eye level, a small black camera angled perfectly, waiting to capture the moment a man lost his dignity. The sign was pristine, almost mocking. Authorized farm access only. Road usage fee, $300 per month. And then that little footnote, the part they hoped nobody would bother to read. Managed by Community Access Solutions, LLC. No county seal, no official HOA letterhead, just a generic company demanding a ransom for my own lifeline. That was the first thing that flipped the switch for me. This wasn't a warning, it wasn't a communal notice, it was a pure, unadulterated invoice. This farm, this stretch of ground on the north side of Silverwood County, it's been the backbone of my family longer than the concept of covenants and committees even existed. My dad worked it, his dad before him. We didn't do it because it was easy or because it made us rich. We did it because once you've poured enough sweat and blood into the dirt, it stops being property and becomes a responsibility. We didn't have investment portfolios or paper safety nets. We had the dirt that fed us, the ground we paid taxes on, and the rhythm of honest work. But the folks in Redwood Creek, they moved in liking the idea of a farm nearby. The view, the quiet, the postcard aesthetic, they just didn't like the reality. The dust, the noise, the diesel, the hours we kept. Their rules started creeping up like kudzu. Heavy vehicles banned 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., the exact window my business needed to run. Permits required for excessive traffic. Fines for dust. They dressed it up as community harmony and quality of life. But crops don't follow HOA calendars, and my buyers weren't going to wait while I begged for permission to deliver feed. I tried to adjust, running trucks before dawn, scheduling deliveries in the dark, dancing around rules written by people who knew more about granite countertops than fixing a fence. It didn't work. Missed deadlines meant canceled contracts, and my already tight margins started collapsing. I sat at the kitchen table one night, bills spread out, and realized the chilling truth I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't about rules or safety. It was about control. It was about whether they had the power to dictate the terms of my very existence, simply because my life didn't fit their view. And once you understand that, you stop negotiating. You stop hoping things will get better. You start looking for an entirely different way in. That's when the memory of the old road resurfaced. It didn't pop up on a map right away. It came back the way important truths do, quietly, when you finally stop lying to yourself about what you need to do. I was parked outside the HOA office one morning, engine idling, about to go inside and ask for another damn permit. And I thought, how strange that my entire livelihood depends on whether a room full of strangers likes the sound of my truck. Then I remembered the back pasture. Behind the far fence line, beyond the stand of old cottonwoods, my dad used to point there and say, "Used to be a service road back there, son. County ran it before the highway went through." Sitting in that truck, staring at the glass door, that memory landed like a stone. I drove home, pulled out every faded county plat, every ancient, yellowed PDF from the online archives. It took hours, but there it was, a faint line labeled unmaintained public right-of-way. Part of it cut straight through my property. The rest traced the edge, forgotten for decades. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a loophole. It was simply a fact they had decided to ignore. I called my daughter Maya. She's studying civil engineering, a smart kid, quiet until she isn't, the kind of mind that sees structure where others see a mess. I told her what I'd found, and she just said, "Send me the files." The next evening, we were standing knee-deep in weeds, saplings thick as fence posts, thorn vines wrapped around everything. Maya, with her survey pole and bright vest, walked the line slowly, checking elevations, calculating runoff paths. When she finally looked up, she wiped her forehead and said, "It's doable, Dad, but it won't be easy." I just smiled. Easy hadn't kept this farm alive. We brought in Jesse, known him since high school, the kind of man who can fix a broken engine with baling wire and sheer cussedness. He showed up with a big brush cutter and an old case dozer that looked older than the HOA bylaws, but was twice as reliable. The three of us stood there, facing that wall of green. Jesse spat into the dirt and chuckled. "Hell of a place to put a road, man." I told him, "That's the point. This isn't about convenience anymore. It's about independence." We worked slow, methodical. Maya was checking grades constantly, so the first rain wouldn't wash everything away. Jesse cleared the brush, the engine roaring like it hated the vines as much as we did. I hauled debris, rocks, rusted wire, broken posts, the quiet evidence of how long this path had been ignored. By the end of the first week, we looked utterly exhausted, but something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't asking permission anymore, and once you stop doing that, the ground beneath your boots feels different. Work like that doesn't stay secret for long. You move enough dirt, and someone eventually asks questions, not because they care what you're building, but because they're annoyed you didn't ask them first. The first sign was a woman standing at the split-rail fence, her heels sinking slightly into the rough soil. Brenda, the HOA compliance officer, sunglasses on, clipboard tucked tight. She had that practiced stillness people wear when they assume their authority speaks for itself. "Good morning," she said, voice polished smooth. "I'm with Redwood Creek. We've received concerns about this construction." That word, construction, was chosen carefully. Concerns from who? I asked, wiping dust from my face. She gave a practiced, non-unkind smile. From residents, about erosion, about traffic, about how this may affect the community's view shed. I nearly laughed. The view shed was the horizon line of trees and fields that had been there for a century. "This road has proper drainage," I said, keeping my voice level. "It slopes away from the subdivision. Water runs back toward my pasture, same as it always has." She nodded, jotting something down. "Even so, the HOA has an obligation to preserve aesthetic harmony and environmental stability." There it was, the phrases that explained everything. Language so vague you could drive a truck through it and still call it compliance. I told her about the easement, the county right-of-way, the surveys. She waved it off. "That may be so, but when changes impact the broader community, oversight becomes necessary." I didn't argue. I just said, "This land is mine, and the road is on it." Her pen paused, and she looked at me over the top of the clipboard for the first time. "We'll need to review this. In the meantime, I'd advise you not to proceed further." Advice, another careful word. Jessie watched her click away, her heels punctuating the wrong sentence. "That wasn't about dirt, man." "No," I answered. "That was about permission." The letters came a few days later, polite, professional, never saying stop, only saying review pending. Never calling it illegal, only citing potential environmental impact. They cited bylaws about visual continuity and runoff liability, all written broadly enough to mean whatever the board needed that week. They weren't worried about the view. They were worried about the precedent. Because once one person stops asking for permission, others might remember they don't have to either. We kept working, not louder, not faster, just steady. Nothing scares people who live by rules more than someone who follows the law and keeps moving anyway. By the second week, Jesse brought in the grader, the sound of the engine rolling through the field like something ceremonial. Metal against earth, shaping it just enough. Maya checked the slopes again, explaining why water has to move the way it wants to move, not the way we wish it would. Then, truckload after truckload of gravel came in. We spread it, leveled it, packed it down. And then one morning, we stood there and realized it already existed. I eased the old Chevy out of the barn and rolled onto the gravel for the first time. Crunch, 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 each stone settling into place. No speed bumps, no cameras, no neighbors watching. Just a straight line between my work and the world. I reached the county highway and just sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing. Something loosened in my chest that had been tight for months. That day, I drove to town in the middle of the afternoon, ran errands, talked to people I hadn't seen in ages because I'd been too busy trying to schedule my life around other people's clocks. I came home 2 hours earlier than usual. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was steering again, instead of being managed. I thought the hard part was over. I thought the work had been the test. I didn't know yet that the moment something good takes shape, someone somewhere starts figuring out how to take it from you. They didn't come back angry. That would have been honest. They came back with more paperwork. It started with an email, environmental review notification. By noon, it was a heavy letter citing erosion, traffic, and that infuriating viewshed preservation again. I called the number, and the woman on the line spoke softly, thanking me for my cooperation. I explained the drainage, the easement. She listened, she agreed, then she said, "Even so, the board needs time to evaluate mitigation options, controlled access, usage limits, monitoring." When I asked if the HOA had jurisdiction, she wouldn't answer directly, just said, "When changes affect the broader community, authority becomes shared." The next day, 2 consultants showed up with clipboards, taking photos, pointing at puddles. They were there to build a simple story. Farmer acts alone, threatens community safety. HOA reluctantly steps in to manage the risk. Another letter arrived, requesting a temporary pause in use. No timeline, just temporary, stretched thin. I kept using the road, out of necessity. That's when the language turned meaner. Liability exposure, insurance implications, and then, the word that chilled me, potential remedies. I stood on the road one evening. I realized they weren't trying to stop the road. They were trying to own it without ever saying the word. They weren't going to fight me on paper. They were going to put something heavy in my way. Something expensive, something meant to make me choose between compliance and collapse. It arrived on a Tuesday. I woke early, coffee in hand, ready to run a load of hay. I rounded the curve near the tree line and slammed the brakes. There it was, overnight, like a mushroom. A steel gate, 12 feet wide, painted black. Square posts sunk deep into fresh concrete. This wasn't a farm gate. It was commercial. Right in the middle sat the keypad. Off to the side, that small black camera, aimed perfectly. I walked closer. Authorized vehicles only. Managed by Community Access Solutions, LLC. Road access fee, $300 per month. They hadn't sued me. They hadn't arrested me. They had monetized me. The anger didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves. The first wave was the heat in my chest when I read that $300 toll. The second came when my phone lit up. Neighbors, strangers, all telling me to rip it down. Hook a chain to your tractor and teach them a lesson. The advice was loud, immediate, certain. I stood there, staring at the gate through the windshield, picturing it. The chain, the low gear, the steel popping loose. I had the right, but I also had the camera staring back at me. That's when the anger shifted. It cooled just enough to sharpen. That gate wasn't just blocking a road. It was asking a question. What kind of man are you when someone dares you to be stupid? They wanted me loud. They wanted me on video. They wanted the headline. Local farmer destroys HOA property. I knew how easy it would be to give them that. Jesse showed up, took one look, and said, "Say the word." I walked over to the fence line, picked up a rock, rolled it in my palm, and set it back down. "If I pull it down," I said finally, "I win 30 seconds. If I don't," I looked at the camera, "then I win everything else." Maya arrived, jaw tight, immediately scanning the angles, the depth of the concrete pour. "They planned this, Dad," she said quietly. "They know they want you mad." "I know," I said. "So here's what we do. We don't touch it." I walked back to the truck and grabbed my tape measure. Not the tow strap, the tape measure. Maya's eyes widened when she realized. I started documenting. The width of the gate, the curing color of the concrete, the exact wording on the sign, every line, every letter. Maya filmed with steady hands. Jesse wrote down times and dates. The anger didn't go away, it just found a job. 3 days later, the trap tightened. The first feed truck didn't show. The supplier called, hesitant. County told us to hold, man, until things clear up. Then, 2 men from the county, clean boots, clipboards, showed up at the edge of my property. "We're issuing a temporary hold." One of them said, "Pending review. Could be a few days, could be longer." The gate had stopped my truck. The paperwork stopped everyone else's. Maya spread the notices out on the kitchen table. The math was simple and ugly. 7 days. That's how long I had before the farm tipped from struggling into failing. If this doesn't move fast, Dad, we're done. That night, the kitchen table became the war room. Maya was pulling up records. Then she turned the screen toward me. A business registry page. Community Access Solutions, LLC. Filed recently. No history. No projects. We scrolled. An address popped up. Not an office park. Not a commercial building. A residential street. That's not a business address, Jesse said. No, Maya answered. That's someone's house. The ticking got louder in my head. 5 days now. We pulled tax records. The house belonged to an elderly woman. Until Maya clicked one more tab. Dad, she said quietly, rotating the laptop. The last name matched. Not mine, not the HOA's official name, the president's. This was the mother's house, same last name, same mailing address on multiple filings. Jesse leaned closer. The company collecting fees on my road was registered to the family of the HOA president. We didn't celebrate. This wasn't victory. This was motive. The LLC had been formed 3 months earlier, right after the HOA board meeting where the traffic complaints first showed up. The key detail: HOA boards can't just invent revenue streams. They need votes. They need disclosure. This LLC had none of that. Instead, it had invoices for third-party compliance services. They used our dues to build the gate, Jesse realized. And now they're charging you to use it, Maya finished. That's not oversight. That's a business model. I called the county clerk's office, not angry, just precise. I asked about the road reclassification request. Oh, that, the clerk said. Filed and denied same day. Filed by Community Access Solutions, LLC. Denied same day. They knew they didn't have authority, but they acted anyway. I called the sheriff's office next, calm, giving them the report number. Paper's how this ends. Then, someone left a grocery bag hanging from the fence near the old entrance. Inside was a USB drive. We opened it. Deliberate emails, internal HOA memos discussing pressure tactics. If we restrict the road long enough, he'll have to negotiate. The smoking gun wasn't the gate, it was the intent. For days left, I finally knew who was holding the rope. I didn't need to pull the gate down. I needed someone who knew how to make people put their hands up. I called Grace Holloway. Grace Holloway didn't arrive like someone coming to fight. She arrived like someone coming to end something. She pulled up in a faded gray Lincoln, no logos, just miles. She didn't shake hands. She just said, "Show me everything." We covered the kitchen table with deeds, plats, emails, LLC filings, the USB drive. Grace read like someone measuring a body for a coffin. "They don't have jurisdiction," she said. I nodded. "And they know it." She tapped the gate photo. "That's unlawful obstruction of a public access easement." Then the LLC paperwork. "And this is self-dealing." She wrote 3 words on her legal pad. "Emergency injunction. Hearing." "We don't argue," she said. "We forced discovery." 3 days later, we were in court. The HOA's expensive legal team sat across the aisle, but President Karen Vance was absent. The judge entered, a woman with posture like granite, who cared only about precision. Grace stood first. "Your Honor, this is a case of unlawful obstruction, misappropriation of HOA funds, and coercive pressure intended to force a landowner into financial submission." The opposing attorney tried the deflection smile. "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. The gate was installed in good faith." Grace didn't let him finish. She placed the documents down. "The county plat showing the boundary ends before the road. The reclassification request denied on the same day. The LLC registration tied to the president's mother. The internal memos outlining the strategy of financial pressure." The judge read it all, slowly, carefully. When she looked up, she didn't look at Grace. She looked at the other table. "Counsel," she said calmly. "Sit down." The ruling came clean and sharp. The gate was to be removed within 72 hours. The HOA was barred from asserting jurisdiction. Damages would be awarded. A formal inquiry into financial misconduct would proceed. One strike of the gavel. Final. We drove home that afternoon in silence. The gate was still standing, but it was already dead. They didn't announce it. No emails, no apologies. The gate came down on a quiet Thursday morning. I was sitting on the porch with a mug of black coffee when I heard the engine. A county truck, white paint dull with age, a flatbed behind it. 3 county workers climbed out. Here for the removal, one of them said. They didn't treat it like a spectacle, they treated it like work. The concrete saws started up, shrill. Sparks jumped. Steel gave way. The post shifted. The gate sagged, then lowered onto the truck bed with a dull, final thud. Just like that, it was over. The oldest worker wiped his forehead. Shame it came to this. I looked down the open road, sunlight running clean along the gravel. No, I said. It came exactly where it needed to. A few minutes later, a sound carried up the road. Diesel. A delivery truck eased forward, the same one that had been turned away weeks earlier. The driver grinned and waved as he rolled past the spot where the gate had been. The road answered him. Gravel shifted. Life moved through. Maya let out a quiet, relieved laugh beside me. Freedom doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives with motion. The county asked Maya what I wanted to name the road. I thought about my father, the reason I hadn't lost my head, the reason I waited. I looked down the gravel. Grayson Trail, I said. The name didn't sound new. It sounded like it had always been there. People keep asking me what the lesson is. They want something simple. Here it is. They brought paper to take my freedom. I used better paper, and the truth, to bury them. Because land outlasts committees. Work outlasts rules written by people who don't understand it. And freedom, real freedom, doesn't come from breaking things in anger. It comes from standing still long enough for the truth to do its work. Tell me in the comments below. If you were me, what would have been your very first move when you saw that gate? Would you have grabbed the tractor or the phone? And do you think the HOA deserved the legal scrutiny they ultimately faced? Hit that like button if you believe land rights matter more than aesthetic harmony, and subscribe for more stories about fighting the good fight.